Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm here today with Jamie Gillespie, who's a prosthetist and orthotist at Pace Rehabilitation. Jamie's got a unique insight into the needs of an amputee following a motorcycle accident which resulted in below-the-knee amputation. Jamie left his career in the army to retrain as a prosthetist and orthotist. So I'm going to be speaking to Jamie today about the challenges posed in the last 6 to 8 months of COVID-19 and how PACE has provided continuous support to amputees during this time. So we've got 15 minutes, so Jamie will get started straight away. There'll be a number of patients who had amputations just prior to or right at the start of lockdown. How did you deal with that at PACE?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, we had a number of people who were both facing surgery for amputation and also a load of people who had recently had amputation surgery. And often in that case, we would map out rehabilitation weeks, if not months in advance, just to make sure that people have as smooth a journey as possible. Of course, in March, the world turned upside down somewhat and things changed and we needed to consider our response to that. We did stay open across both of our sites, just outside of London and south of Manchester, offering clinical and manufacturing services. And we were very keen to make sure that those new amputees had as smooth a journey as possible. The last thing people need at that early and very vulnerable time after amputation is to go and sit at home on the sofa for too long. They need to be kept busy and distracted and see that there is some progression in their rehabilitation. So those who were facing amputation surgery, many of them had their surgery postponed or delayed, and that's still the case for some of them, and some have been put back on track. Those who had amputation, we did begin to work with them very soon after surgery, which we would normally do. That can be as little as 10 days to 2 weeks following surgery. They often begin with our physiotherapists. And then about a month, 3 weeks to a month after amputation is when a prosthetist like me would step in and begin to manufacture the initial prosthesis. So I'm pleased to say across both of our sites, we were able to support these people reasonably well, considering all the interruptions. And we have offered them a smooth journey, and that journey continues. It's a long, slow process during rehab. And many are doing well now. So some of our below-the-knee amputees are off walking aids altogether, and some of our above-the-knee amputees have minimised the use of their walking aids, and everybody's continuing to do well.
So it's obviously a difficult time for you, but it was something you were able to navigate pretty smoothly.
Yes, it needed a bit of coordination, of course, from this end. We had to take precautions in clinic about what we could do. We did rely a lot more on community physiotherapists. Case managers were able to offer us great insight, as often they do. Community physios were able to pick up some of the activity that perhaps would have been carried out in clinic, but we had to minimise travel and the journeys to us. And where essential, we were carrying out early physiotherapy and the clinical services. It took some discussion, it took some consideration at this end, but we are clear now that we absolutely did the right thing, and progress has been good for this group.
Absolutely. You touched on us all spending a bit more time on the sofa. We've all spent a lot more time at home, which naturally has led to some inactivity and in some cases social isolation. What challenges has this presented to your patient group?
It's not uncommon for amputees to have to watch their weight a lot more closely after amputation surgery. Often people will continue to eat as they did when they were a little bit more active, but of course activity is much lower, and eating the same only leads to one thing, unfortunately, and that's just a steady increase in weight. And that's always been a constant challenge, regardless of COVID or not. But what we have seen over the last 8 months or so is perhaps that being a little bit more of a challenge than normal. People have been at home with a bit more time on their hands, body weight has increased. We've seen situations where some of our patients have even gained 5 to 10% of body weight in the last 6 to 8 months, which is an awful lot of weight in quite a short period of time. So we've been very keen to assist with that as best we can and try and manage that. From a prosthetic socket point of view, it only takes a little bit of an increase in weight, a few kilograms perhaps, before a comfortable socket becomes a less comfortable one with socket pressures and sores. And so we've been carrying out the normal adjustments as we would. In some cases, we've had to make larger sockets and revisit the socket fit. But certainly weight has been an issue, and I think that is going to continue to be an issue for the winter and maybe into next year. We'll see how it goes, but we're certainly mindful of that, and the whole team here are offering instruction and guidance as best we can. One of the other aspects where we've seen people struggle perhaps a little bit more than normal is with the psychological challenges. This has put pressure on all of us, regardless of injury or not, over the last 6 to 8 months, and I think we've all felt that in one way or another. For people who are recent amputees or working through their rehab journeys, especially if we consider some of the pressures that they feel from their legal cases, which are often in the background, we do see and feel the weight on their shoulders of this. We have an excellent clinical psychologist here at PACE, and she's been involved with offering support remotely to those who need it. I was a little bit reluctant about whether some of our patients would actually engage with that. It's fair to say most of the people here are working age, mostly men, and whether they're going to feel comfortable talking to a computer screen and somebody perhaps they've not met on the other side of that screen. But what we found is that it's been really well received, and it continues to be in demand, and I'm glad that we offered that service. We had it in place not long before. Zoom is a big part of our work anyway, and it just worked out really well and timely that we had everything good to go.
Yeah, I think having an in-house psychologist, it's not that common for people in your sphere of prosthetic rehab, so it must have been a really useful thing for you in the last few months.
Yeah, definitely. It's as I mentioned, we feel the pressures that these people carry with them, and yeah, we're looking at how we can perhaps try and increase those services in the future. But for now, we're offering support via Zoom, and that's being well received.
And with people taking up more sports and different activities at the start of lockdown, and people trying to get fitter if they have put on a bit more weight, have you seen any change in the type of prosthetics you've been providing during this period?
Yes, yeah, we have. I think we all tried the Joe Wicks for a week or two, and then didn't continue with that. And it's fair to say it was the same for many of our patients at home as well. With body weight in mind, and that slowly creeping up, and a bit more time on people's hands, and also the children being at home where there's families and the children needing to be entertained and kept busy, then we have had a look, and we have been working with perhaps more specialized high activity prostheses than we normally would. Typically in a Paralympic year or an Invictus Games year, then we would see a higher than normal interest in sports and activity prostheses, because people are seeing it on the TV and in the media, and that's fantastic. What we've seen this year, even though it was a Paralympic year that didn't happen, is that we've seen a lot more people make contact and request a device that will just help them to exercise at home or in the park with the children. And I know that our physiotherapy teams have been suggesting and recommending home equipment for exercise. So we've been helping to source rowing machines. Peloton bike has been extremely popular to allow people to exercise within almost like a class setting at home. There's been treadmills for walking, and people wanting to go outside and play with the children in the park and kick the ball around. So there's a number of various options of sports equipment that we can provide, from blades and hybrid blades and rowing prostheses and legs that are set up well for use on the Peloton bike. And we've worked with a good number of those over the last few months, and I think we're going to continue to do that throughout the winter as well.
That's great. So finally, there'll be a number of patients who have faced and are still facing significant NHS waiting lists, who, they've got a need for care right now. How have you tried to address this?
Yeah, the NHS teams, I think, have responded in different ways. We talk to our NHS colleagues constantly. It's a very small industry that we work in, and we know each other reasonably well. Some centres were able to adapt the way they work and provide a type of service. It's mostly emergency repairs. Some centres did just close the doors while they figured out how they could offer services in the future. So it was varied, but but mostly patients who perhaps were being well supported found that they weren't able to access the NHS in the same way. And certainly waiting lists have ramped up now. People are making contact, explaining that they're in some discomfort and they need an adjustment, and waiting times of weeks and months are being offered, which is unfair for those who need to continue with work and continue looking after families. So we've seen a higher than normal number of people make contact with us explaining these challenges, which we're well aware of. And we've seen people find funds to come visit us. And we realise that private prosthetics is extremely expensive. It just is as it is. The components that we purchase from the manufacturing companies are very expensive, and normally out of reach for people who don't have some kind of third-party funding or claim behind them. And so we do discuss the different options with the NHS patients who make contact with us, but some will just find the money and come to work with us. And we've certainly seen that over the summer. And at least a few times a week now, we're having NHS patients make contact just to inquire about what they can receive from us. But I think the main part of our work is supporting those who have been through some kind of accident or medical negligence where there is a claim in the background. And we'll still continue to work closely with solicitors and case managers.
And these new patients that are contacting you who might not have been in contact before, they're people who might have been through the NHS for all of their prosthetic care. Is that right up until now? Yeah,
so they would have relied on the NHS, and in most part they would have had reasonable and good service. And I think for young working people, that service is heavily dependent on being seen quite quickly. If you're at work and there's an issue, you want to have that issue resolved so you can continue being at work and continue being at home with the family. And then the long waiting list will just add to the challenges that we're all facing at the moment. So it's mostly due to the delay in service. The NHS will provide reasonable equipment and mostly can keep people comfortable, although a little bit limited in the options that they have up their sleeves. But certainly people are knocking on the door here for more specialised sports equipment, which is not available to them. And in some cases, unfortunately, those who are just not very comfortable, who just need a bit more of a timely response.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Jamie. It's been a really useful insight to what you guys have been doing over the last 6 to 8 months and how you've been working with your patients and are going to continue working with them going forward, and the things that are going to be taken on, like the work with the psychologist. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any questions with Jamie this afternoon, but if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me or Jamie. You'll be able to find our email addresses online. Do get in touch. Next week, I'm sure you're pleased to hear, will be the return of Emma Lyons in the Soundbite sessions. She'll be joined by Sherry Taylor, who is a specialist rehab dietitian at Specialist Nutrition Rehab, and they'll be discussing the surprising link between pain and nutrition. So thanks everyone for joining us at lunchtime. Thanks, Jamie, for your time, and see you all soon.